live again on YouTube. I hope. Yes, we are. Great. So yeah, I've been getting electric shocks this past week from random things in the house, outside of the house, literally everywhere in my day-to-day life, and it's freaking me out. I'm not happy with it. Is it a sign from outer space? Or is it like an other dimensional being trying to slip into our reality? I don't know, but, I better move on to the next person, whatever it is. Other than that, I've been trying to sew a dress, and it's so far been successful, sometimes not so successful other times. I've had to redo a couple of things, but that's how you learn. I've also made the mistake of trying to hand sew an entire dress instead of using a machine. I'm that stubborn. And I also decided it would be a great idea to not use a pattern to sew with, because I don't know why I'm this way. Yes, Rebecca said, lost you on YouTube. I've tried to make a new one now. It said again that somehow there was copyrighted material. I don't know. This book is definitely out of copyright, so I don't think it should have anything to do with that. Yeah, I don't know what's causing it. I don't know if YouTube has like a customer service or anything that you can like reach out to and ask what is going on. But maybe I'll do that in a minute. I don't know what's going on. How have your weeks been? Have they been as eventful as mine? Definitely had some exciting electric shocks and some varied attempts at sewing things and sewing clothes that have sometimes worked, sometimes not. I think if you see over there, that's my current bit of the dress. Ooh, no, you can't see it on Instagram. It's over there. There. Yes. That's what I'm trying to sew together. We'll see if it works. I got some really nice new fabric as well, which will be much nicer than this one. This one was like super cheap polyester stuff that I got for like £4 for 4 meters. So obviously it's not going to be that great, but I thought I would just get cheap stuff to start with. So those of you who have joined, who haven't been here the last couple of weeks, I'm reading The Red Laugh. I'm on chapter 5. Those of you who haven't been here for I'm always very awkward here. Those who weren't there last week, how was that so difficult? I read chapter 4, which, as you might know or might not know, we're following a officer in the Russian army during the Russian-Japanese War, which was a war between I can't speak today, I'm sorry, the Japanese and the Russians, and they were basically fighting over Manchuria, which is mostly present-day China and a bit of Korea, I think, as well. And they were fighting over who got it, so to speak. So we're following this officer. They've been attacked multiple times by the Japanese forces. And in the last chapter specifically, he meets a man who was trapped in a sort of big barbed wire entanglement trap that I think the Japanese must have set, with sort of big pits with pikes on them. And he tells how loads of men had fallen to their deaths and they were sort of, speared onto these big pikes. And it's quite a grotesque scene. And he says that the people who were, trapped in this barbed wire entanglement seemed to be like intoxicated. Some swore dreadfully, others laughed when the wire caught them. So really like a very, very grotesque and very horrifying scene. And this man is talking to him who has been trapped in this thing, and he talks about what it was like. And he then dies after saying he hopes he gets a medal for honor, which to the officer who is the protagonist sounds completely absurd. Why would you be thinking about a medal of honor when you've literally just been ripped to death by barbed wire? And the absurdity of it all. And then he recounts, he talks about an evening that he has in the camp with the other soldiers, and they're sort of all standing round. What was that word again that I did not know? It was a Russian word, and it was some sort of kettle or little fire or thing. It was called a samovar. Samovar, probably something like the latter. And yeah, so that's what happened, and he tells about this evening, and they speak about this man that they called Fatty Legs, and they're all like, fatty legs, ha 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 ha. And then one of the people is like, have you no respect? Fatty Legs just died this morning or something. And everyone sort of falls quiet, and they just stand there around the samovar. And the night goes down, and he sees in the darkness a sort of creeping terror that's engulfing all of them. And it's quite horrifying. Yeah, so I will probably go ahead and read chapter 5 today. It's a slightly shorter chapter than last week. Let me see how long it is exactly. It is maths, not my strongest. Actually, it is actually roughly about the same length as last week. So I'll just go ahead. Fragment 5. I was already asleep when the doctor roused me by pushing me cautiously. I woke, and jumping up, cried out, as we all did when anybody wakened us, and rushed to the entrance of our tent. But the doctor held me firmly by the arm, excusing himself. I frightened you. Forgive me. I know you want to sleep. 5 days and nights, I muttered, dozing off. I fell asleep and slept, as it seemed to me for a long time, when the doctor again began speaking, poking me cautiously in the ribs and legs. But it is very urgent. Dear fellow, please, it is so pressing. I keep thinking that some of the wounded were left. What wounded? Why? You were bringing them in the whole day long. Leave me in peace. It is not fair. I have not slept for 5 days. Dear boy, don't be angry, muttered the doctor, awkwardly putting my cap on my head. Everybody is asleep. It's impossible to rouse anybody. I've got hold of an engine and 7 carriages, but we're in want of men. I understand. Dear fellow, I implore you. Everybody is asleep, and everybody refuses. I'm afraid of falling asleep myself. I don't remember when I slept last. I believe I'm beginning to have hallucinations. There's a dear fellow. Put down your feet. Just one. There. The doctor was pale and tottering, and one could see that if he were only to lie down for an instant, he would fall asleep and remain so without waking for several days running. My legs sank under me, and I am certain I fell asleep as I walked. So suddenly and unexpectedly appeared before us a row of black outlines, the engine and carriages. Near them, scarcely distinguishable in the darkness, some men were wandering about slowly and silently. There was not a single light, either on the engine or carriages. and only the shut ash box threw a dim reddish light onto the rails. "What is this?" asked I, stepping back. "Why, we are going in the train. Have you forgotten? We are going in the train," muttered the doctor. The night was chilly, and he was trembling from cold, and as I looked at him, I felt the same rapid tickling shiver all over my body. "Damn you," I cried loudly, just as if you couldn't have taken somebody else. "Hush, please hush," and the doctor caught me by the arm. Somebody out of the darkness said, "If you were to fire a volley from all the guns, nobody would stir. They are all asleep. One could go up and bind them all. Just now I passed quite close to the sentry. He looked at me and did not say a word. Never stirred. I suppose he was asleep too. It's a wonder he does not fall down." He who spoke yawned and his clothes rustled. Evidently he was stretching himself. I leant against the side of the carriage, intending to climb up, and was instantly overcome by sleep. Somebody lifted me up from behind and laid me down, while I began pushing him away with my feet, without knowing why, and again I fell asleep, hearing as in a dream fragments of a conversation. At the 7th burst, "Have you forgotten the lanterns?" "No, he won't go." "Give them here. Back a little. That's it." The carriages were jerking backwards and forwards. Something was rattling, and gradually, because of all these sounds and because I was lying comfortably and quietly, sleep deserted me. But the doctor was sound asleep, and when I took him by the hand, it was like the hand of a corpse, heavy and limp. The train was now moving slowly and cautiously, shaking slightly, as if groping its way. The student acting as hospital orderly lighted the candle in the lantern, lighting up the walls in the black aperture of the entrance, and said angrily, "Damn it, much they need us by this time. But you had better wake him before he falls into a sound sleep, for then you won't be able to do anything with him. I know by myself." We roused the doctor, and he sat up, rolling his eyes vacantly. He tried to lie down again, but we did not let him. "It would be good to have a drop of vodka now," said the student. We drank a mouthful of brandy, and all sleepiness disappeared entirely. The big black square of the door began to grow pink, then red. Somewhere from behind the hills appeared an enormous mute flare of conflagration. I just spit it on the page. Conflagration, as if the sun was rising in the middle of the night. "It's far away, about 20 versts. "I feel cold," said the doctor, snapping his teeth. The student looked out of the door and beckoned me to come up to him. I looked out. At different points of the horizon, motionless flares of similar conflagration stood out in a mute row, as if dozens of suns were rising simultaneously. And now the darkness was not so great. The distant hills were growing more densely black, sharply outlined against the sky in a broken and wavy contour, while in the foreground all was flooded with a red, soft glow, silent and motionless. I glanced at the student. His face was tinged by the same red, fantastic colour of blood that had changed itself into air and light. "Are there many wounded?" asked I. He waved his hand. "A great many madmen, more so than wounded." "Real madmen? What others can there be?" He was looking at me, and his eyes wore the same fixed, wild expression, full of cold horror, that the soldiers had who died of sunstroke. "Stop that," said I, turning away. "The doctor is mad also. Just look at him." The doctor had not heard. He was sitting cross-legged, like a Turk, swaying to and fro, soundlessly moving his lips and fingertips, and his gaze there was the same fixed, stupefied, blunt, stricken expression. "I feel cold," said he, and smiled. "Hang you all," cried I, moving away into a corner of the carriage. "What did you call me up for?" Nobody answered. The student stood gazing out at the mute spreading glow, and the back of his head with its curly hair was youthful. And when I looked at him, I do not know why, but I kept picturing to myself a delicate woman's hand passing through that hair, and this image was so unpleasant that a feeling of hatred sprang up in my breast, and I could not look at him without a feeling of loathing. "How old are you?" I asked, but he did not turn his head and did not answer. The doctor kept on rocking himself. "I feel cold." "When I think," said the student, without turning around, "when I think that there are streets, houses, a university—" He broke off, as if he had said all and was silent. Suddenly the train stopped almost instantaneously, making me knock myself against the wall, and voices were to be heard. We jumped out. In front of the very engine upon the rails lay something, a not very large lump, out of which a leg was projecting. "Wounded?" "No. Dead. The head is torn off. Say what you will, but I will light the headlight. Otherwise we shall be crushing somebody." The lump with the protruding leg was thrown aside. For an instant, the leg lifted itself up, as if it wanted to run through the air, and all disappeared in a black ditch. The headlight was lit, and the engine instantly grew black. "Listen," whispered somebody, full of silent terror. How was it that we had not heard it before? From everywhere, the exact place could not be defined, a groan, unbroken and scraping, wonderfully calm in its breadth, and even indifferent, as it seemed, was borne upon us. We had heard many cries and groans, but this resembled none of those heard before. On the dim reddish surface our eyes could perceive nothing, and therefore the very earth and sky, lit up by a never-rising sun, seemed to be groaning. "The fifth first," said the engine-driver. "That is where it comes from," said the doctor, pointed forwards. The student shuddered and slowly turned towards us. "What is it? It's terrible to listen to." "Let's move on." We walked along in front of the engine, throwing a dense shadow upon the rails, but it was not black, but of a dim red colour, lit up by the soft, motionless flares that stood out mutely at the different points of the black sky. And with each step we made, that wild, unearthly groan that had no visible source grew ominously, as if it was the red air, the very earth and sky that were groaning. In its ceaselessness and strange indifference, it recalled at times the noise of grasshoppers in a meadow, the ceaseless noise of grasshoppers in a meadow on a warm summer day. And we came upon dead bodies oftener and oftener. We examined them rapidly and threw them off the rails, those indifferent, calm, limp bodies that left dark, oily stains where the blood had soaked into the earth where they had lain. At first we counted them, but soon got muddled and ceased. There were many, too many for that ominous night, that breathed cold and groans from each fibre of its being. "What does it mean?" cried the doctor, and threatened somebody with his fist. "Just listen." We were nearing the sixth first, and the groans were growing distinct and sharp, and we could almost feel the distorted mouths from which those terrible sounds were issuing. We looked anxiously into the rosy gloom, so deceitful in its fantastic light, when suddenly, almost at our feet, beside the rails, somebody gave a loud, calling, crying groan. We found him instantly, that wounded man, whose face seemed to consist only of 2 eyes, so big they appeared when the light of the lantern fell on his face. He stopped growing and rested his eyes on each of us and our lanterns in turn, and in his glance there was a mad joy at seeing men and lights, and a mad fear that all would disappear like a vision. Perhaps he had seen men with lanterns bending over him many times, but they had always disappeared in a bloody, confused nightmare. We moved on, and almost instantly stumbled against 2 more wounded, one lying on the rails, the other groaning in a ditch. As we were picking them up, the doctor, trembling with anger, said to me, "Well?" and turned away. Several steps farther on we met a man wounded slightly, who was walking alone, supporting one arm with the other. He was walking with his head thrown back, straight towards us, but seemed not to notice us when we drew aside to let him pass. I believe he did not see us. He stopped for an instant near the engine, turned aside, and went past the train, past the train. "You had better get in," cried the doctor, but he did not answer. These were the first that we found, and they horrified us. But later on we came upon them oftener and oftener, along the rails or near them, and the whole field lit up by the motionless red flare of the conflagrations began stirring as if it were alive, breaking out into loud cries, wails, curses, and groans. All those dark mounds stirred and crawled about like half-dead lobsters let out of a basket, with outspread legs, scarcely resembling men in their broken, unconscious movements and ponderous immobility. Some were mute and obedient. Others groaned, wailed, swore, and showed such a passionate hate towards us that was saving them, as if we had brought about that bloodily indifferent night and been the cause of all those terrible wounds and their loneliness amidst the night and dead bodies. The train was full, and our clothes were saturated with blood, as if we had stood for a long time under a rain of blood, while the wounded were still being brought in, and the field come to life was stirring wildly as before. Some of the wounded crawled up themselves, some walked up tottering and falling. One soldier almost ran up to us. His face was smashed, and only one eye remained, burning wildly and terribly, and he was almost naked, as if he had come from the bathroom. Pushing me aside, he caught sight of the doctor and rapidly seized him by the chest with his left hand. "I'll smash your snout," he cried, shaking the doctor, and added slowly and mordantly a coarse oath. "I'll smash your snouts, you rabble." The doctor broke away from the soldier, and advancing towards him, cried chokingly, "I will have you court-martialed, you scoundrel, to prison with you. You're hindering my work. Scoundrel, brute." We pulled them apart, but the soldier kept on crying out for a long time, "Rabble, I'll smash your snout." I was beginning to get exhausted, and went a little way off to have a smoke and rest a bit. The blood, dried to my hands, covered them like a pair of black gloves, making it difficult for me to bend my fingers, so that I kept dropping my cigarettes and matches. And when I succeeded in lighting my cigarette, the tobacco smoke struck me as novel and strange, with quite a peculiar taste, the like of which I never experienced before or after. Just then the ambulance student with whom I had travelled came up to me, and it seemed to me as if I had met him with several years back, but where I could not remember. His tread was firm, as if he were marching, and he was staring through me at something farther on and higher up. "And they are sleeping," said he, as it seemed quite calmly. I flew in a rage as if the reproach was addressed to me. "You forget that they fought like lions for 10 days. "And they are sleeping," he repeated, looking through me and higher up. Then he stooped down to me and shaking his finger continued in the same dry and calm way, "I will tell you. I will tell you." "What?" He stooped still lower towards me, shaking his finger meaningly, and kept repeating the words as if they expressed a completed idea. "I will tell you. I will tell you. Tell them." And still looking at me in the same severe way, he shook his finger once more, then took out his revolver and shot himself in the temple. And this did not surprise or terrify me in the least. Putting my cigarette into the left hand, I felt his wound with my fingers and went back to the train. "The student has shot himself. I believe he is still alive," said I to the doctor. The latter caught hold of his head and groaned. "Damn him. There is no room. There, that one will go and shoot himself too soon, and I give you my word of honour," cried he, angrily and menacingly. "I will do the same. Yes, and let me beg you, just walk back. There is no room. You can lodge a complaint against me if you like." And he turned away, still shouting, while I went up to the other who was about to commit suicide. He was an ambulance man, and also, I believe, a student. He stood pressing his forehead against the wall of the carriage, and his shoulders shook with sobs. Shoulders shook with sobs. It's a good one. "Stop," said I, touching his quivering shoulder. But he did not turn round or answer, and continued crying. And the back of his head was youthful, like the other students, and as terrifying, and he stood in an absurd manner with his legs spread out like a person drunk who is sick, and his neck was covered with blood. Probably he had clutched it with his own hands. Well, said I impatiently. He pushed himself away from the carriage, and stooping like an old man, with his head bent down, he went away into the darkness, away from all of us. I do not know why, but I followed him, and we walked along for a long time away from the carriages. I believe he was crying, and a feeling of distress stole over me, and I wanted to cry too. Stop, I cried, standing still. But he walked on, moving his feet ponderously, bent down, looking like an old man with his narrow shoulders and shuffling gait. And soon he disappeared in the reddish haze that resembled light and yet lit nothing. And I remained alone. To the left of me, a row of dim lights floated past. It was the train. I was alone amidst the dead and dying. How many more remained? Near me, all was still and dead, but farther on the field was stirring, as if it were alive, or so it seemed to me in my loneliness. But the moan did not grow less. It spread along the earth, high-pitched, hopeless, like the cry of a child, or the yelping of thousands of castaway puppies, starving and cold. Like a sharp, endless, icy needle, it pierced your brain and slowly moved backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards, backwards and forwards. That's the end of chapter 5. Oh, hi, Imo Mini. Nice reading. I just popped in. Can you name the book and author, please? Yes, it is The Red Laugh by Leonid Andreyev that I am reading. Yeah, it's a very bleak book, as you can imagine, set in the Russian-Japanese War. And basically, I do this every week. And if you want to pop by again, you will probably see at the beginning of every reading, I just do like a recap. So yeah, there's that. So he's been left out there they've just left. Is that, have I understood that right? Weird. So I will certainly try. That would be great. I'd love for you to join. I probably will also do some short stories in the future. I've read a really great short story today, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But yeah, this is, again, very bleak. I'll probably keep saying this after every chapter. But so far, yeah, we've established it's very bleak. I kind of liked the turn of phrase where he says the reddish haze that resembled light and yet lit nothing. I've come to find that I really enjoy these kind of great. I love short stories. Amazing. Then I'm sure you will like it when I do them. Yeah, so I really have come to enjoy these sort of turns of phrase where the writer says one thing and then sort of completely negates it in the following phrase or the following sentence. I can't come up with an example just yet. But like something that resembled bats but weren't anything like bats or whatever. I really enjoy that sort of turning of phrase because it just leaves you feeling very alienated and sort of confused about what they're talking about, and I really enjoy that ambiguity, and it's so specific as well. Yeah, and we've obviously set up a theme of this redness everywhere. I guess a very obvious way of reading that would be the red symbolizing violence and death. Maybe you guys can or have ideas of other things that it might symbolize in this context, but I am assuming that it mostly resembles or symbolizes violence and death. Yeah, also interesting character, this doctor who at the beginning seems to be so so value driven. What word am I looking for? Very noble in character, because he's trying to set up this this rescue party, I guess, to pick up all the wounded soldiers from a specific battle, probably that has happened, or an attack that has happened, that they know has happened. And he seems to be such a noble character, and he wakes the officer up who has been sleeping, or who wants to sleep, because he's been up for 5 days straight. He wakes him up to organize this rescue party. And then at the end, this doctor himself seems to the whole thing, the whole absurdity of the situation, and the violence and the horror of it all, I guess, makes him sort of lose that nobility of character, or that principled nature, makes him lose that, and he becomes angry and menacing, and he leaves the officer, who is our protagonist, there, wherever he is. It feels, I don't know if you feel the same way, but to me it feels like the middle of nowhere. He leaves him there, and he leaves him there because there is no room in the train, supposedly because they're carrying back so many wounded people that there's no space. And he says, you can lodge a complaint against me if you like. And so this officer is left here with nowhere to go. And I do wonder how he's going to get back, if at all, to his camp. But I'm assuming that we won't find out, because of the fragmented nature of this book. I don't feel like at the moment we've got a very consistent linear plot line going on so far. But yeah, I'm enjoying it. Very bleak though. Do let me know what you think about it so far, and what your thoughts are on the narrative, or on certain turns of phrase, or certain, ways of saying things that you might find interesting. Do let me know. Also, I never know if you can say you've read something if you've listened to an audiobook of it. I don't really consider it having read a book, but there we go. I listened to an audiobook of a short story today. I can't remember what it was called exactly, but it was by Jeff Vandermeer. Let me see if I can find the title of the short story. And I'd love to hear anyone's thoughts. If anyone wants to read this short story, please do. I feel like it's just changed my life right now. At least today, it changed my life. Jeff Vandermeer. Something with monsters, and like, the title sounds cheap, but it's not. It's really not. The world is full of monsters. There we go. And the first link that I find is it as bleak as the red laugh. It's not. It's different. I don't know if anyone has seen the movie Annihilation, but if you have, Jeff Vandermeer is the person who wrote the book on which it is based. So if you like a sort of existential science fiction type thing that is sort of almost metaphysical as much as it is sort of horrifying, then you will like this short story. It's called This World is Full of Monsters by Jeff Vandermeer, and the first link that I find on Google has the full short story on it, so it's definitely available online. So please, everyone who is here, I like the phrase, it changed my life at least today. Yes, it did. And it will have, retrospectively, I am sure that I will remember this day that I read this short story, because I'm sure that it will have changed my life. It's about, it's so difficult to describe. It's about the merging of oneself with an alien reality or alien life form. That's all I can really say about it. It is so bizarre, but so meaningful in a way. It's written in such a way that it's really meaningful, and almost metaphysical and philosophical and existential. And it's really good. It's really good, which it makes me want to now read Annihilation, because I've watched Annihilation, the movie, and I really enjoyed it, especially the ending. Not gonna give away any spoilers, but I really enjoyed that film. I watched it in Oxford, actually, in the common room. I don't know, and yeah, watched it there, and it was quite a good movie. I think up there together with The Lighthouse on sort of the more tasteful horror films, if you can call it a horror film, that I've seen. I definitely like the sort of more cosmic horror genre. Anyway, just read This World is Full of Monsters, and if you don't feel like it, let me know and I'll read it to you. And yeah, that's all. I will probably be doing some short stories on here as well, mostly sort of weird fiction-y short stories, because that is my cup of tea. And or anything that you would like me to read, I'm happy to take suggestions if there are any stories that you like or that have changed your life as well on specific days. Yeah, I'd be happy to hear about them. Let me just go back to where I was. Great. Yeah, that's all for today, I think. And I will be back, of course, as usual, next Tuesday at 8 p.m. London time, or UK time generally. I will be back again with more red laughter. I think we're almost halfway through the book. So yeah, we've got, how many pages have we done? We've done 70 pages, and the book is 190 pages. So almost halfway. Definitely almost halfway. I think next week will be definitely halfway. All right. I might also speed up a little bit, and read a tiny bit more and chat a tiny bit less, because I don't know why I keep chatting about literally nothing. But let me know if you've read The World is Full of Monsters from Jeff. From Jeff. My name's Jeff. Written by Jeff Vandermeer. I don't know why I just did that. Okay, I will see you next week, and I hope you'll join me again. And let me know if you have any suggestions for short stories, or if you would want to do the Tuesday session, do the short story on the Tuesday session and take a break from the red laugh and come back to it. Anything is fine with me. Basically, I am here to serve you, the few people that are here. And yeah, I will see you again next week. And do send me a message if you want to discuss anything. both in this book or in other books. I really enjoy like tandem. Do you say that? Tandem reading a book. I really enjoy reading books together with other people. So if there's a book that you really want to read and you want to have someone to discuss it with over Zoom or Skype or a phone call or whatever, I am the person to read it with, because I really enjoy discussing books with other people. Even though sometimes the things that I say aren't the most intelligent. Yeah, that's that. I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye. Okay, now we have to end this one. Blah.